Cool beans. All right, we're going. Welcome back to the Movie Well Marathon. We are starting our
Woo!
new marathon today. I'm Andrew.
Mac.
You say that again? I didn't get the I'm. It's like skipped.
Mac.
Okay, well, that didn't help, but cool. That's Mac. Yeah, we're doing The Mummy, the really, really good one from
Yes.
1999, directed by Stephen Sommers, with, of course, Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz and Arnold Vosloo, and John Hannah. Yeah, but you know them. They're great. We love them. They're
Yeah.
wonderful.
The people.
But yeah, we're hopping into The Mummy. We're definitely gonna do the three with Brendan, and then because it's maybe in the same universe, we're gonna do the Tom Cruise one, and
Man, we just watched. I don't
yeah,
know if this is gonna fall in the timeline.
it will.
We just finished watching Nightmare. Oh no.
Night at the Museum.
Um Night at the Museum franchise, and that one ended on a bit of a bomb
A
too.
lot of these end really poorly, unfortunately. I
Yeah.
mean, the Terminator one was kind of saved because 6 wasn't as
Mhm.
bad as 5, and I mean, the Apes one was all right. The Apes one just kind of kept getting better, and Jones wasn't that bad, I guess. But like these last few ones we've done, the last one has been awful, just
Yeah.
awful.
Like there's a reason it was the last one.
Yeah, and but anyway, I mean, starting with this one,
Yeah,
just
starting with the first one.
yes, and remind me real quick, and remind all of our 14 subscribers who are definitely listening. Which of these have you seen and not seen?
The first one, and I think I've seen bits and pieces of the Tom Cruise one.
Oh wow. Okay, so you've not seen Mummy Returns or the Emperor's Tomb or Secret of the That's not Secret of the Tomb, that's Night of the Museum again.
Yeah,
Yeah, the third one. But that's
yeah.
cool. Okay, so fun things to explore. So then I want your general thoughts real quick on this one, and then I'll do mine like we do.
Yeah, I first watched this movie, like, I think in college, and I watched it mostly because people online were like, "This is such a fun, unique movie," and I see people not talking about it, and I'm like, "I wanna be a part of the club where, it's cool and nobody really talks about how cool a movie is," and I went and I watched it, and I was like, "Wow, yeah, this movie is pretty cool, and I can't believe I've not seen it before." And I maintain that on this watch. I think it's hard to describe because the plot is kind of all over the
A little,
place,
a
and
tad, just a tad.
yeah, but, like, I don't feel like that makes the movie bad. I think it's actually part of its charm.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those instances where breaking the rule about, like, having a clear, like, goal at the beginning that carries you through to the end of the film, like, that's a normal writing rule. You wanna set up your conflict, make the climax of your story, the resolution or, like, the decision of, like, who's gonna win that conflict, and then the resolution is sort of wrapping everything up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um This film just is a series of things that they try to do and it doesn't work or there's a change and they have to do something else. It's just a constant like new plan, new plan, new plan, new plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually works pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of makes me think of like a D&D campaign, honestly,
I never thought of it
where
that way, but you're absolutely right. It's got some severe D&D vibes, really.
yeah, I mean, one of my notes is so much of this movie has D&D vibes. The characters are just poking around the environment, hoping to complete their task or their quest, and then the DM just keeps throwing new
Mm-hmm.
obstacles at
Mm-hmm.
them, and they have to adapt every time. It's it works really well, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the reason it works well is because of how we feel about the dynamics of our characters, but even that's not super clean cut for me. It's not, like, super like, I wouldn't necessarily argue this movie has the best characters or the best character dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they're good enough and they interact with their environment and their situation in interesting ways. So it's not even necessarily the relationships with the characters, like between the characters. It's just that the characters are well designed for the story that they're in, and it's really fun to see them like use their strengths and just
Yes.
get lucky sometimes on some of the
Uh-huh.
roles.
Uh-huh.
And that's I think where the charm of the movie is just it's characters in an environment where they get to like be weird and use strengths that wouldn't be normal and good fun.
Absolutely agree. I think you had mentioned something about like it's not like the best thing ever. I think it's kind of got that. It's a late '90s, early 2000s movie, but like one of the best examples of it. Like
Okay.
it's got not so great special effects that, and at this point are not so awful that they're kind of charming. The
Yes, agreed.
writing, while not wonderful, the actors do well enough that again, it's more charming than it is bad. You know what I mean? Like there's a vibe of the late 90s early 2000s movies, and it's just noticeable and awful. And like this has a bit of that vibe, but it's not bad. It is more charming than it is
It's
problematic.
weird because I think if you were to like write down on paper the qualities that this film has and then compare it to those, like you're saying, early 2000s films, it matches those qualities. But instead of being a negative trait for the film, a lot of it almost seems to kind of work in its favor. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not usually a big fan of, like, heavy color filters on, like, film, but
Hmm.
the beginning of this film with the extreme costumes and makeup and setting where it all just kind of, like, the color scheme is so tightly woven, it almost all looks like it's the same thing, and yet the lighting is so good that you can still see clear expressions on everybody's faces and, like, the shadows are, like, defining.
Hmm.
It's such a strong aesthetic start to the film, it sets such a strong dramatic tone,
Hmm.
and I really like it, even though we then have a really hard tone shift
Hmm.
from this high level, like, ancient mythological drama to like, we literally transition from a
Yeah.
narrator who is generations of the pharaoh's guard
Hmm.
to shift to, like, the commander who then immediately runs away to our actual main character, Rick,
Knocking
who
over.
is
Oh, yeah, yeah, and then we go from
yeah,
that to
like
Evie knocking over bookshelves. Very,
yeah, so,
yeah.
like, it goes such a strong tone shift and yet done so well, like, the transition to move from mythological hero who is, actually in the real world because of generations of these guys to, "Oh, here's the soldier, like, here's a general in an army," and then he runs away, and all you have left is, like, this one fairly competent but totally outmatched
Uh
soldier.
huh. Uh huh.
Like, that's it works really well somehow. Like, the shift transitions from that drama to the almost comedy of the moment, and it doesn't feel jarring.
Yeah, I think part of that is because they write the silliness in a way that's still believable. We have like borderline comic relief kind of characters, but they aren't so ridiculous that they like I don't know. I don't know how to put it in a nicer way. They aren't Jack Black kind of characters. They aren't
Mm,
cartoon characters. Like Jonathan is definitely one of our comic relief characters. Whether it's because he's getting beat up or because he does not work in the environments that he is in, but he's still a
mhm,
believable person. Same
mhm.
to an extent. Same with Benny. You know, like they're ridiculous comic relief characters that are fun to fuck with. And then when Evie does things that are funny, it's coming from a genuine thing that her character would do. She's a little awkward.
Endearing,
She
you
yeah,
like
it's
her more.
endearing. Yeah, so it's more believable, and so it it doesn't feel like we went from writing this amazing dramatic opening to now let's write some comedy. Let's change the movie entirely. Like it feels like it's still part of the same movie. So
Mhm.
yes, love that. I love your opening statements. I'm gonna take us deeper because you're right. There is a big internet beloved following at this point of this movie. There's another layer to it though, and I'm more chronically online than you are, so I'm more aware of it. This movie, some people call it, uh, or should we reword it? A lot of people say this movie was their bisexual awakening, and
Mhm.
yes, like I mean, just yes, because first, let's get it out of the way real quick because it's not nearly as interesting. You've got a Nox and a Moon killing it. You've got
Mhm.
Rachel Weisz Evie, beautiful, except for the weird early 2000s eyebrows, which they do amend in the next movie, thankfully. But I mean, she's lovely. But then you've got Ricochet O'Connell, good fucking god, and you've got Ardith Bay. Ugh, I love Ardith Bay. He's Ardith Bay. I mean, come on, it's right there. It's perfect. But he is such a badass, and he is so beautiful, and I really love it all. Some people also include Emotep in this because he's walking around in his bathrobes the whole time. Like, I'm not even playing. I absolutely agree. This movie is visually beautiful just across the board. Like, I am a huge like stan of just Brendan Fraser. This era of, because like Ricochet O'Connell is just like the perfect combination of things. He's a badass adventurer man, but he is smart. He's got a little bit of that, like, he's a little rough. He'll manhandle you a little bit, but like, I don't care. He could do it all he wants. I love the scene. I'm gonna hop around a little bit where they're planning to go save the Egyptologist, but they want to keep Evie safe. So he just throws her in the room, locks the door, grabs the other guy, and it's just, this door doesn't open. No one goes in. She doesn't come out. Right? And they're just like, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, yes, sir. Got it.
There's so many movies where the arrogant dickhead of the hero protagonist is telling people what to do, and it's so cocky and so obnoxious. I could listen and watch him yell at people all day long, because I think
yeah.
In a more serious note,
agree,
it's which is, I think, on a more serious note, they do illustrate enough that he is a legitimate leader. So it's not coming from nowhere. It is, this guy knows his stuff, and so it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could absolutely just take charge. I mean, that's the opening scene, is him having to do that. So it is believable that he does that throughout the movie. I do mention it in passing, but I do appreciate that they illustrate that he's not an idiot. He's not. He's not even quite arrogant, as he is just kind of, I want to say, cocky. I know those are kind of used in tandem, but I think it's a little bit different, because he doesn't do anything that isn't warranted or earned. He's a crack shot. He knows where to go. He knows how to survive. Like, he's just a badass. And it's clearly they are drawing inspiration, fairly, from Indiana Jones. Totally fair at this point. But like, Indiana Jones, his relationship with Marion is so problematic and just rife with resentment and bitterness and just no. Whereas it's subtle, and it's not really something that you have to care about in a movie like this, but the relationship that develops between Rick and Evie, I find incredibly believable. They both have mutual interest immediately, both of them. And then the conflict, that Hermione and Ron back and forth going at each other kind of thing, it's believable because they don't want to admit they have feelings, but they're also immediately being sweet to each other. He gets her the tools. She's flirting a little bit. Like, it's not something they force. It's not something that comes out of nowhere at the end, like a Disney movie. Like, I like this little relationship that develops. It feels believable, and I enjoy it.
Well, it also kind of feels like, on that note specifically, it kind of feels like an adult crush, where like they both like have feelings for each other, but they're not prioritizing that over like the rest of their life.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like they're intrigued by the other person, and that shows in their actions, and they both can kind of tell they're both kind of intrigued, and they don't really know if they're gonna do anything with it, but like it's there. It's I think it's well written and well played, really, is how it goes. I'm not crazy about their first encounter, but I do think they like.
Yes, I should say I don't support Mr. O'Connell kissing Evie without consent. I don't love that. I will fully admit that's not great.
It's a very, very common trope from this time period in film.
It is.
So like I give it a, not a pass, but like a sticker
acknowledgement.
Of the studio probably wanted you to do that.
And one demerit.
Yeah. And then the other one is sort of like, he does make it's not a good enough reason to be an actual justification, but he does point out that he's like, I was gonna die in the hour, so
Right.
I was acting like a dead man, and that doesn't really make it better to me, but like it does contextualize it in a way that I hate less, I guess. Still don't like it though.
Yeah, I,
Anyway,
I I can appreciate
with
that.
the
I can appreciate that.
with the exception of that one moment, I feel like the reason why when Rick takes charge, we don't hate it is because he's like, not only does he show leadership qualities, but like overall, he's like the only way I can think to put it is he's not a jackass. Like
Hmm.
he genuinely tries to
Yeah,
help
that is
people
a good way to
it
put it.
all
Yeah.
the time.
Hmm.
Even Benny, who constantly is like betraying him and he has like a rivalry with and they don't like each other, he's trying to save his life at the end of the
Yes.
film.
But I
Like
also like how he
he's
does try to kill him several times.
yeah.
I
Like
it's weird how he walks that line of like he isn't, like you said, a jackass, but he's also willing to murder someone. Like I love that for some reason. I like that
it
kind
works
of
so well.
character. Yeah.
Mhm.
I like it a lot.
I think it's he's not the kind of hero that's like, I would never kill to like
No.
for my own life or anything. He's not like that by any means, but he's also not the guy who would just kill to kill
Yeah.
or kill because it's easier,
Mhm.
right? Like he's got a little bit more going on too. And I think that's it's nice to see a character communicate all that in just the way they interact with their characters and the
Yes.
decisions that are being made. There's
Absolutely.
not like some long monologue about like, I learned one time that I never wanted to kill a man in cold blood when I
Right,
made this
right. Yeah.
mistake. It's just he just acts like a decent person in the
Mhm.
situation that he's in. So that's points for the writing there and the
Yes.
portrayal. Well
I would
done.
say that could apply to all the characters though, really, because I think my favorite thing about this movie, and I'll try not to rant as long as I did just now, but my favorite thing maybe about this movie is how many different examples of the adventurer we have here, and how
Yes, yes.
well they're portrayed with the writing and the character moments. Because we have Rick, just the adventurer. We have Evie,
Mm,
the desire for adventure, but never a real good excuse to do it. She has
the
the
academic,
knowledge, but not the experience. That's her whole thing, is that she's being denied a place with the Bembridge scholars because she doesn't have experience in the field. Then you have Jonathan, who does have field experience as a dig man, as a con man, as a liar. He has, you almost want to say, no knowledge. But they include this really nice detail I liked. Every time one of the plagues shows up, he quotes it. He quotes the scripture that plague comes from.
mm,
Beautifully subtle, but showing that he isn't actually a complete idiot. He has a lot of the same knowledge that Evie does. He just hasn't applied it the same way. Then you've got Ardith Bay, the guy who has been cultivated and raised in this world of adventure. This isn't even an adventure for him anymore. It's this job, which is just makes him
mhm.
all the cooler. Then you've got Winston, the guy whose whole life was adventure, and he's the only one whose life wasn't claimed by it, and he has nothing but regret. Like all these little examples, and then you got Benny, who for whatever reason keeps getting swept up in it and only survives by taking advantage of people. And then you got the Americans, who are only in it for the glory and the money. That's the other thing too. Going to Hamanoptera, they're all in it for a different reason. Evie's in it for the knowledge. Jonathan's in it for the glory of it, and Rick is only really in it for the money of going there and back. He doesn't even care about the money of finding. He doesn't care about finding the Ark in the end. He doesn't care if the Ark exists or not. I'm using Indiana Jones still. So I like all the different motivations. I like all the different examples of the adventure that are explored here and kind of illustrated. And I think it works. I really like seeing all these different things exist within each other. And I had not thought about it before this movie in general. So like I'm kind of going to keep an eye out in future movies across the board if we have these different perspectives of like the same thing. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's actually great to point out the archetype character, like the archetypical character use in this film because again, this film breaks so many like writing rules. It has no consistent goal from start to end beyond
Hmm.
like kind of survival, but not even because like the survival part doesn't really kick in
Right.
until maybe an hour into the
It is
film.
about halfway.
And
It's a 2 hour movie. For the
yeah.
first hour, it is finding the book. The next hour, it is
Mhm.
surviving. And then within that second hour, it's surviving slash saving Evie slash killing Emotep.
Mm-hmm. And it's like even the use of the archetypes and the characters. The scholar is a woman, and that's not crazy shocking, but it is different, and it's different enough for the characters to have made a comment on it in the film. I absolutely love that one cut where it was like, "They are led by a woman. What does
does
a
a
woman know?"
woman
And it immediately
know?
cuts to you like
Mm-hmm.
listing a whole bunch of things, and they immediately like get into the tomb because she's explaining the
Of
whole plan.
course.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
I
And like her brother is supposed to be the one with the experience, but he's like not good at
mm-hmm.
it. And like they're like, this guy should, for all intents and purposes, should be the Indiana Jones of the group. But he is not.
Mm-hmm.
He can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they still managed to make him lovable. That is
Yes.
very interesting to me
Yes.
because on paper, I should hate that character. I don't
Yes.
usually like the sort of obnoxious characters that tag along and are only there because of like a family connection or something.
Mm-hmm.
But like for some reason, I don't know if it's just the way the actors portray it. I think it maybe is that, but he doesn't feel like he's underfoot the entire time. He
Mm-hmm.
constantly makes them trip up. Like the boat is a great example where he just builds everybody that they're looking for Aminatra. But
Right.
it's it's
He's
not something that is ever, I don't know, it doesn't really, maybe because it never really fully impacts the story. Everybody else makes as many mistakes as he does. It's just looks more idiotic when he makes those mistakes.
yeah. Well, I think part of it is he is, I want to say, he's stupid, but he's not incompetent. And they show that throughout the movie. Where like he's got his foot in his mouth a lot. It doesn't become that big of an issue that he's telling people where they're going because they're going there too. You still shouldn't be doing it. And I like how Rick grabs his shoulder like that just to fuck with him. But I also like I put a lot of stock in he's there digging with them when they're looking for the book. He's involved. He's doing the work. He complains, but he's like they aren't illustrating him as like totally lazy, kind of like Flash Thompson in Spider-Man: Homecoming. Totally unrelated. It's just what I thought of. Like he's there taking credit for everything they do at that decathlon. He doesn't do anything. You know, like he's not a part of it. Jonathan is a whiny little dude who's really easy to punch, but he's still there. He's on the camels. He hates the camels, but he's doing it. And I like it's when Evie is complaining about Rick, and then Rick comes in and we see him all cleaned up, and you know she's just, oh my. Yeah. I like that Jonathan immediately calls her on it because like he's aware of it. Like he's not incompetent. He's aware of their situations. He can keep up. He's just not he's not made for this kind of work, man. He's just not. I like when he's also yelling at Ardith and Rick when they're clearing the rubble, and he's telling them to put their backs in, and they both turn ready to kill him. Like,
yeah,
love all that. Love all that.
It's fine.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right that you absolutely should hate him, but he is more lovable, and I think they kind of continue that in the next ones. There's a couple of moments I could think of specifically where it's like, oh shit, the gloves are off now. Like you went from Goofy Goober, Barney Fife to Andy Griffith and in a second because you always had the capacity to do it, and it's kind of cool to see that. But yeah, you got kind of lost that there. Oh,
potentially the cultural aspect between like the British characters and the American characters, and also the Egyptian characters, like that, the way that they play that works really well for the film actually, and it feels a little unnecessary in the sense it's like, why even include that sort of like cultural like interaction, I guess, when you're in Egypt doing like a mummy movie. Like why are we also having like an American European rivalry jostle, mess around with people kind of thing? But like it actually works really well in the film. Even like the dumb jokes where like I think it's the second guy to get taken by the mummy where he's like, give me a bourbon and a bourbon chaser.
A shot of bourbon and a bourbon chaser.
Yeah. And I'm just like, what? That's not even how you drink bourbon.
Americans.
And it's still funny. Like it's still good. It makes the film better. The race to the city and the interactions and like Americans like got their guns blazing on the boat,
Yeah.
and first John's all like, well, Americans, and then they save him from
Americans.
somebody, and they're like, you know what?
Bloody good
Good
show,
work, man.
chaps.
Yeah.
And did I panic? I think not. So yeah, I do like that dynamic. I like when both Jonathan and Evie are shit talking the Americans, and they have to keep saying no offense. And Rich is like,
Yeah.
none taken, none taken, none taken at all. Yeah, love all that. I will say as a brief moment of nitpickery, and then I think if we have some other positives to talk about, we should probably get to the Mummy in a second. But small nitpick. When I was younger, I was fully invested in just loving watching all the Americans and the Egyptologists die because they're kind of tools. I don't mean that in like in a good way or even like a cinematic way. They're kind of assholes, but like when you watch it as an adult and you're paying attention, they're not really. They're just adventurers. They're out seeking treasure. There is more of an interesting imperialistic white people stealing cultural treasure thing. We're not talking about that right now. It's not that kind of movie. But I think this movie wants us to feel bad for them as they die. And I don't think they utilize them well enough to earn that. Because I've never really cared about them dying. Like, they don't, for one, they're not interesting enough. And we don't spend enough time with them, I think, to care. Like, the guy with the glasses who gets his eyes and tongue ripped out, he's the sweetest, and so you feel bad for him when that happens. But the other ones, I just don't, like, I think you could have. I don't know if we had to have that rivalry necessarily, or if we did, we spent more time maybe amending it to the point where maybe they're more one team in the end, so it feels more like a... It's not just that we want to stop Emotep from regenerating, we want to save these characters. And I just don't feel that in this. I just don't, and I think they wanted us to feel that way.
I think I agree. What I think I maybe don't fully align with is the idea that the movie should spend more time on that concept. I think having the Americans as sort of like a heel in the film, like for our main characters, in the sense that they're it's an easy group of people to sort of like make fun of in the film and become like a kind of an enemy without really being a full-on antagonist group. And I actually I made a note that because the two different groups are there at the same time discovering things, you can actually make the discovery feel more organic and still happen at double speed because there are two groups making the discoveries rather than like one group making rapid fire discoveries. It's one group makes this discovery and the next group makes that discovery and the first group makes another discovery, and it feels a little bit more paced out that way. But back to like sort of the sympathies of the groups and the audience, I think for me, I did feel bad when those characters got attacked by the mummy. If only because even if they were bad people, going out like that was not what they deserved. And
That
like
is
bad
rough,
people
yeah.
isn't even the right way to put it. They were kind of jerks to go out as,
Right.
getting completely like all of your life is like sucked out of you by a mummy and you die a husk, or even just for a while live without your eyes and your tongue. Like, that is kind of a horrific way to go.
Absolutely.
And their behavior in the film in no way like
Warranted
literary
that.
wise warranted. Yeah. So it's like maybe it's because I watched it when I was older, but I do feel like a small amount of sympathy for those guys. But at the same time, I don't think the film wanted to bog us down with like feeling a massive loss for those characters, because even though they keep the stakes pretty high in the film, you never are supposed to grieve because grieving takes time and it slows things down, and they wanted to keep the speed up and going. So they never kill a character that you really, really like until maybe the end, because maybe somebody likes Benny.
Well, I like
don't know.
Winston, but I also that's one of those deaths that you
Well,
appreciate
okay.
because he wanted that. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
I do think I think you're right, but I think that again could be interpreted as a negative, and that this movie, which is
Okay.
it's an adult movie, it's not really made for kids. It doesn't even go as far as we don't really lose a character. I mean, we lose the curator of the museum, but not really in a way that's super necessary. I mean, those zombies weren't gonna chase you down the sewers, man. Like,
Mhm.
you didn't need to do that. Um, so I don't think you're wrong, but I do feel like amending it wouldn't hurt the movie. I think there are ways to move things around just a tad, so for there to be a little more weight, maybe, because like I can't even remember their names. I don't even know if we hear all their names. You know what I mean? Like
I think we
the
do.
the bourbon guy, I have no idea who he is. He's bourbon guy. The last guy, I don't remember either. I think it's Mr. Burns or something who loses his tongue, and then the Egyptologist who his only real moments we have with him are him yelling at the diggers, knowing that there's probably booby traps so that they should open the box and be injured. Him
Evil.
being sexist. That's also you're right in that it's interesting that in 1999 they have Evie, leading all this and clearly being intelligent, but like he's the only one who questions her really throughout the movie. Like no one
Mhm.
else questions it. This movie still doesn't
Yeah.
pass the Bechtel test, but like
There's only
she
one female character. It
there's
can't.
technically two, but one of them's dead for
Technically
most of the
too.
movie. But like the only moment he has is being sexist and then running away and causing damage to people. So when he dies, on one hand it's like, oh
It's just
no, Emotep's
justified.
on his way, but at the same time it's like, ha 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 ha, eat shit. Like I didn't like this
Yeah.
character. So like I just think it's something that again, it's not a big deal. The movie doesn't necessarily suffer from it, but it's one of those things that I thought maybe could be adjusted for a little bit added weight, just to add to the horror movie. Because for me, I mean, this movie is a reboot of a classic horror character, and the back in the day, it was kind of terrifying some of the things they did. And I think when you have a monster that's going around killing people, the weight is taken away when the monster's killing people that so far we don't like. When it's not a movie
Mhm.
that when you're supposed to be rooting for the monster. They do that with like the later Chucky movies where like Chucky's going on his little rampage and he's killing people. It's like these are all characters that we've hated the whole time. So are we supposed to root for Chucky or not? Like it's a little weird.
Well,
So
and here's an example of like something kind of left field, but like the reason people get so invested so quickly in the Hunger Games is not because of the crazy premise, but because Katniss immediately volunteers to protect her younger sister. Like the
mm,
entire first 2 or 3 chapters just sets up how important Prim is to Katniss.
mm-hmm,
And then the moment Prim's name is called, your world feels as shattered as Katniss's world feels.
mm-hmm,
And so the reason we're invested is because of that character that we care about being put in jeopardy, right? And we don't really have a lot of moments like that in this film, not really truly genuinely.
yeah,
A little bit with Evie sometimes, but not a lot.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, all that aside, still digging it, like the adventure, all that. But like the Mummy, we should talk about the Mummy a little bit since
I
it is the
okay, I
Mummy.
gotta say it because we've mentioned it so many times. He takes the eyes of the one character with
I
glasses.
know. I was gonna mention it. I appreciate that you caught that. That's
Like
weird.
they make such a point too. Like they Velma him where he gets knocked down, he can't find his
Mm-hmm.
glasses. And they make such an effort. I was actually noticing how cool it is that they like were able to make like the background so blurry while you're still able to see
Yeah.
the character in focus,
Uh
right? Like
huh.
there was some cool camera stuff going on there. But they spend so much effort and time for you as an audience to understand that this character cannot see. And then the mummy takes his eyes like
Yeah.
immediately. It's like it's
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some yada yada that as soon as he has the material, he could heal it. But that's like, why can't you just heal then? You know, like.
Well, and it feels like a plot point that maybe got, like, deleted or something. Maybe there's a deleted scene where the mummy, like, genuinely can't see that well, and that's why he thinks that
That'd be
Evie looks like his
that'd be really
princess,
funny.
but
That'd be really really funny.
it's kind of like a headcanon that I have is that, like, the
Yeah.
mummy can't see that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In that moment though, I did want to mention I really like when Evie sees him for the first time. It's not like a classic
Mhm,
horror movie scream. It's more of like a throaty, guttural, holy shit scream. Same with
mhm.
Rick when he like just the whoa, like it makes it
Yeah.
more believable that it's not that horror movie trailer clip kind of. It's like a real
Mhm.
human reaction. I think it does add to the the drama of the moment, because that's what you do, short of just saying holy shit. Like, and I
Right.
enjoyed that.
No, it's interesting because I mean, like, I don't like when I get in a position of danger, I don't usually do like the classic scream thing.
Right.
I react differently, and I wonder how much of that is something that's created in pop culture just because the classic horror movie Scream has such strong like social or cultural pull to it.
Hmm.
Um it'd be interesting to see kind of like there's someone out there, oh, this is so off topic. There's somebody out there who has a theory that romance as we understand it in our culture might be almost a product created by the romance stories that we have mass produced.
Interesting.
Um,
So maybe there's a
yeah, and
horror, like a similar thing with horror as well.
yeah, the way that people react when afraid may not be as cookie cutter as we tend to portray it in films.
Intrigued, very intrigued. But yes, okay. Back to this though. Just, I mean, I would love to talk more about that. But while we are on the topic of the Mummy, I really dig thinking about it how they only do the bandages in the flashbacks. He doesn't walk
Mm,
around in it. Like I just I feel like I appreciate that decision because every other Mummy movie since the Boris Karloff one, it's just a dude in bandages. And Boris was only
mhm.
actually in bandages for like one scene. Um, but like so to have him be this decaying brown corpse, I appreciate and like that choice. And then the more and more like weirdly chunky he gets, I think my favorite visual example of Emotep in this movie is right after he eats the Egyptologist, where he's got the
Mhm,
robes and he's like almost there, but he's still got like the holes in his cheeks and like holes in his rib
mhm.
cage. Like that is awesome. Love that whole vibe, Emotep. You're looking good.
No, I agree. I think the it's not really a practical choice because it's not really about the fact that it would be pretty dissolved at that point. But like the fact that he comes out like juicy, they call
Hmm.
him with like
Hmm.
all his bits still kind of hanging off his skeleton. And they don't go with the classic like wrapped mummy look, but they sort of just incorporate general like aesthetic fashion choices as he starts to more gain more of a form. I think that works really well.
Hmm.
The one side effect it has is a lot of the times a mummy won't have, like, an eye or much of a face
Hmm.
because it'll all be, like, wrapped up, and that's kind of a
Yeah.
part of the scare factors. It's kinda like a Slender Man effect where it's just sort of, like,
Yeah.
tracking you, but
And
you
I
can't
do
see a
I do
face.
like that
Um,
visual aesthetic as well.
but, like, I was gonna say, I think you maybe lose a tiny bit of gravitas with the face that we get in the, like, the special effects and everything. The first time we see him, he's got, like, kinda like his eyes kinda, like, bug out a little
Hmm.
bit, and his like, the teeth in his jaw look a little bit
Yeah.
funny.
That first one with
Um
the eyes and the tongue is a little bit weird.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's still spooky enough that you're invested, and, like, I would never say that this is a great example of a horror or a thriller film, it's much more
No.
action adventure, and so
Yes.
I don't think his first form like that has much of a negative impact on the film, it's just a different vibe than what you might normally get out of, like, a classic
Yeah.
thriller, gothic style horror film.
For sure. For sure. But when it is just more of a that fun action adventure movie, I think especially these days that kind of implies a lack of care, maybe. I dare say. Like
Mhm.
things like Fast and the Furious are so popular that they're so successful, but like there's not the same kind of thought that goes into
They're
those.
just kind of produced,
Yeah, but so
I
like
guess.
for them to think about the monster to that extent, to put more care and idea into it is really cool, and I appreciate it.
Well, that's something that we actually should note for the entire movie because, like, the setting like, the sets and the costumes and the acting and
Yes.
the script writing, and I'm assuming the directing, like, so much of it is cared for.
Hmm.
Um, please.
Bless you.
Excuse me, yeah. Um, so much of the set and the costumes and makeup, everything is just super intentional and well designed in the film, and I think that's really, really fun. I love it when it looks like there's intention coming out of every part of a film, like, That's why I think part of the reason why I like soundtracks so much. That's why I like
Speaking of which,
animation so
music
much.
was great, but yes, keep going.
Yeah, it's why I like animation so much because every single choice in animation has to be intentional. There's no
Mhm.
actor just sort of like fidgeting and that happens to make it on the screen, right? Everything is intentional, and I get that from this film. I like everything that everybody does is so it builds into the film. Nothing distracts. Everything is a part of what is created. And it's not even, I think, that it was like meticulously created. It was just that there was an environment for the actors to be in, and then they just managed, like maybe the chemistry of the actors was so good that they were just really able to build these relationships. But
Mhm.
it kind of feels like, again, with those D&D vibes, you built these characters, you built an adventure for them to go on, you threw them together and saw what happened, and what happened was magic. Um,
Yes, it
and that
was.
only happens if everybody is in sync. Everyone is kind of on the same page about what should be going on in the film, and
Mhm.
that's so cool. It's so cool they managed to do it like that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um we still got some time, and there's definitely like more positives to talk about, but I want to take a little time to talk about some nitpicks, if you don't
Okay.
mind. Just a few, because
Mhm.
it is not a perfect movie. While fantastic and fun, there are a few questions I have. I do feel like there is one specific moment where some characters just like their motivations or their alignment flips for an instant. So first, I don't really know why Evie has to read from the Book of the Dead. Also, I don't know why she feels the need to read from it out loud. And while she
It's easier to
establishes
translate when you're reading out loud.
what, sorry,
It's easier to translate when you're reading out loud.
I suppose, but
Um,
she's also not
I so
translating it. She's just reading it.
well, it's she's reading hieroglyphics, and that's a different process than reading an alphabet that you've grown up your entire life. Even reading like I'm drawing from my examples of trying to read like a Spanish text. Um, when I'm reading a book in English, I can just read the words, my brain processes it automatically, I'm good to go. But when I'm reading something in a different language, it takes more time to process it. And if I don't make it more concrete, sometimes the things just sort of like slip out of my brain.
Mm.
And it actually wasn't common practice to read silently until roughly the Victorian era, because like when you were reading, it was assumed you were reading out loud because that's the level of difficulty that it was for most people. Um, all this to say,
Uh huh.
reading silently is actually a very high level skill that we just kind
Okay.
of assume is common.
All
And if
right.
you're translating something from hieroglyphics,
Uh
you're
huh.
probably going to read it out loud
Okay.
to understand it.
Okay. Okay. Thank. Yeah.
Sorry, this is kind of what I do.
Yeah. No, I realize that now, and I should have known. But like, damn, woman.
I
And
understand your point because I made a comment. I was like, note to self: do not read old tomes aloud until cleared for spells to wake the undead.
right.
But
So
so like
okay.
I hear what you're saying. I don't want to totally invalidate you. It's just like
Well,
I also totally understand why she did that.
yes. See, my complaint does go beyond that. We're like, I'll give her that. Let's say that's fine. She's reading it out loud.
Mhm.
The next thing is I don't fully get why the Egyptologist doesn't
Says not
want
to.
her to read from the book. You
Yeah,
clearly,
agreed.
sir, have not cared about any of the potential magic that's been going on here. You didn't care about the curses. Why would you care about reading from the book? I also don't love that, for one, the first thing she reads is a spell that wakes up Emotep. This feels like to me the biggest yada yada just to get the rest of the movie to work because first of all, Evie being Evie, could you not read what that thing was on that book? Like you didn't see
Right.
anything on that page that said, "Hey, maybe either don't do this or if you do this, this is what will happen." Because there isn't a
Mhm.
joke in this movie like there is in Doctor Strange where like the warnings are late after the spell. Like they don't do that. And
Right.
so and then my next question would be like, okay, did this spell only apply to Emotep? Or did it wake up all the mummies in this general vicinity.
Mm.
Nothing implies that it does wake the other mummies, except for when they leave, that hand bursting out of the ground. But nothing else happens until they come back, and Emotep wakes up all the other mummies.
I
So,
think it's supposed to be just Imhotep because they indicate several times throughout the film that he has some sort of immortal element. Like that
right.
he specifically has the ability to return from death. And then maybe can make other people also return from death.
I suppose. I feel like that part got a little bit weird because even though Evie doesn't believe in the magic of it, you've seen enough weird stuff. I feel like in the last 24 hours that why would you be messing with this? I feel like if you mixed the two evenings a little bit, and instead of her reading it after 2 crazy days and being fully sober, maybe have her do that the night she was drunk, and I think that would work perfectly.
That
Because
actually would be a great plot point. I mean, I think it's perfectly fine the way that it is, with the exception of the fact that she reads like the 2 words that wake up the mummy, right? That is a little bit of a yada yada. But I don't know, as someone who can kind of relate to the idea of there is an old ancient book over there that I can read if I just sneak it out of the guy's arm and open it up, I would be doing that. And I don't know.
well,
I don't know. I could see it happening. I could see it happening.
I can see you doing it, but in Evie's particular case, I feel like there's a little more conservation that would naturally be involved in her perspective that isn't in that moment. You know what I mean?
Don't touch the old artifact
Don't,
conservation?
yeah, like kinda, like don't just start opening it up and flipping through it. Like if this is what you think it is, and your whole thing is being a librarian and wanting to be involved with scholars and all that, and you're getting your grubby little fingers all over it, like I mean, damn, like you're doing all the things you're not supposed to do. I feel like in this moment, it just again, it feels like something that an intoxicated, adventure-driven Evie who is curious would do, not the intellectual scholar that we've seen her be before and after. You know what I mean? Like it's not, again, it's not egregious. It's just one of those things where like the writing I feel like took a dip so that the rest of the movie could happen, and I don't love that necessarily. And then my other nitpicks,
It feels rushed. It does
a
feel
little,
rushed.
and then my other little nitpicks are Ardith Bay. I feel like you need to write that in a way that is believable, but also give him a reason that isn't just killing all of them. Because dude, they're here. They're in this place that they're not supposed to be. You don't like it. You come in, you kill some of them, and then you're like, "Hey, get out of my sandwich." And they're like, "No." Okay, well, you have a day, not an hour, not 2. You've got a full ass 24 hours to get into all kinds of mischief, which they do. And then later on, they have the conversations like, oh, Mr. Secret Society Egypt man, you think killing innocent people justifies preventing this monster from taking over the world? Yes, absolutely. Okay, well then why didn't you? You kind of dropped the ball there, Ardith. Like, damn.
I think the in-world sort of explanation is that he seemed to have been impressed by Rick, and was kind of like loath to kill him, but really he should have.
Something.
Like it's a little out of character, or at the least it's a lack of fulfilling his responsibilities to have not killed them.
Yeah, because he says like, we've been defending this creature for 3,000 years, and because of you we have failed. Like, well, no, because of you have failed.
You should have told
like,
me when you had the chance, man.
It's because of you. You could have stopped this, and you try several times, and you failed, sir. You did. Thank you.
I mean, I think it's unfair to put all of the blame on him.
I don't, because he's clearly the leader of their little gang of magi and out here at Hamunaptra. So yeah, he dropped the ball. I love him. He's great, but this is entirely his fault. 100% on him. He didn't do his job, and it's unfortunate. Other thing that's kind of yada yada. This whole movie is about fighting the mummy, because we got to Hamunaptra, which is basically El Dorado, that Rick has been to. So we need him to take us back. But they don't explain at all how he got there before. He says how his whole garrison, without orders because they believe so much, marched across the desert to find Hamunaptra. They don't say how they do it. They don't say that some general knew where it was. They don't say that someone had been there before. They don't say there was some knight who lost faith and left and walked out and then led them back to it, like, Last Crusade style kind of thing. Like, they just find it. This whole garrison just walks across the desert, like almost as if like it's implied it's like, hey, it's over there, but you have to go through the desert to get to
I don't
it.
see the issue.
What do you mean? To everyone else, this thing is a myth, and they just find it.
I think you're right. I think it's something that I am willing to sort of just be like, because a lot of this film is very much circumstantial. It's very much this group of people went out to try and do something, and there were things that happened, and there's a chain of reaction of events. Like it's cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. It does seem very unlikely that a group of soldiers would just ride into the desert and find the one city that everybody's been looking for. But I will say, I think a group of people has a much better chance of finding the city than one person or a small group of people. And I don't know that there had been very many like large organized groups looking for the city. I think it was just by and large individuals that the Pharaoh guys, the Viro guys would kill. So if like the reason that Rick and Benny survive is because they have a whole garrison that found the city, and the garrison mostly dies, but they make it out because they managed to like get lucky essentially. So when one or two or three or even up to like maybe 10 people who are not soldiers find the city, the guards take them out. When the garrison finds the city, it's harder for them to get all the survivors.
I guess. I feel like that is assuming a lot. Well, granted, it's within the realm of believability. I feel like again, just the only thing you'd have to tweak is open the movie after the Emotep flashback. Open that quote unquote modern day scene with the fight going on, the war going on, but it takes place just outside the city. And the fight is happening, and then the sun rises, and it's more like a holy shit, what did we stumble across? And the fight moves into the city, and because it's a full-blown battle, the Magi can't do anything about it. There's too much going on. And then you can have a similar scene with Benny and Rick and all that, and then everyone dies, and he walks away. So then he realizes where he was, and then he can lead them back. But it wasn't a whole, like, yeah, we just went out to find it and found it. Like, I don't.
That's fair.
I just don't. That I never thought about that until this time. Like, it's such a big deal for Evie. Like, to the point where we know why the curator is playing dumb, but like even the prison guard knows what Hamunaptra is, or the warden. Right. Everyone knows of this mythical, magical, lost city. But it's just something no one can find, even though Evie's father was a famous explorer. Like, there are explorers going on in this world. Like, there are expeditions and stuff. I feel like changing that opening scene a little bit could fix that one issue.
I don't think you're wrong. And I think that for the style of film that they're trying to make, it would be good to have a better story as to how Rick knows about the city. Whether it be changing the current one or coming up with a new one entirely. However, I have also read about plenty of instances where the scholars and academics were like, this lost location, we'll never know, we don't know where it is. And when you talk to the locals, you spend time with them, you find out you've just been using the wrong name and everybody knows where. Like, that's really common. So I kind of like the idea that Hamunaptra is kind of like a like it's a bad kept secret in the sense that like everyone more or less knows where it is, but they avoid it because people who go there die, and so you
Mm.
don't get guides taking outsiders to it. And the academics who are in the area seem like they might be connected to the Pharaoh's guards. They'd be actively trying to prevent people from going to it rather than helping people get to it. There's the whole there's a whole conspiracy level here where that would potentially fall apart should an army of soldiers ride into that situation, right?
Ooh.
But I I can kind of digressing. Even as I'm talking, I'm like, it would be better if, given the real world examples that I've mentioned, they were just like they just needed to convince like a local guard or a local tour guide to help them actually go there, right? So like, it's not a great way to explain how he knows where the city is, but we're gonna go ahead and accept it anyway because the film is all right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's kind of the extent though of like my nitpicks. I mean, I know there's like other flaws, but for the most part, I really vibe with the rest of it, man. I enjoy this movie. We're at that time. Tis a whale, at least for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, this is gonna be a downward slope though. Just strap in for that. So
Man, I
yeah, I
don't
mean,
like that.
there's fun in the next one, but it's definitely not as good. And then the third one is so different. I don't even know if we could count it almost as if it's like the third in a trilogy. Um, and I've only seen the third one all the way through, really, like maybe once, maybe twice, 10 years ago. So this will be kind of fun to look at it critically. And then the last one's awful. The Tom Cruise one is just bad. I don't even care. Like it's just it's shit. So
Was this the one that incorporated like some of the other creatures too?
sorry,
Like
what?
the Tom Cruise one. Well, maybe we'll just get there when we get there. It's fine.
We will. Tis a Whale. Love it. It's great. Love Rick Connell. Love Evie. Love Artist. Oh, that's a fun little Easter egg. Not Easter egg, but reference. When the mummy Emotep in the original comes back to life, he takes on a fake name, and it is Ardith Bay. So it was fun that they included that as our now badass mummy protecting warrior guy. That's fun.
That is fun.
Yeah.
No, he's a great character.
I did catch something. This isn't like no one cares at this point, but I was curious. We did talk when we watched the 2001 Planet of the Apes and how they make the female apes look different unnecessarily so. Do you think it's weird that Anoxinamun's mummy has hair? Like
She's
long
probably wearing a
hair?
wig, but the wig should still disintegrate if
Well,
it's made out
let's
of
say,
female hair.
say it's a wig, say it's not. Like, there's no reason there'd be hair sticking out of the bandages. They would have either cut it or wrapped it up in the bandages. But it was like, it's almost like they did that so we knew it was her. But I don't think that was necessary.
I'm gonna say it might not have been a bad choice if only because of the whole that way we knew it was her. But I don't think maybe it was an instance of not fully trusting your
I
audience, if
think that's
that's the reason why
exactly
they
what it
included the
was.
hair,
Yeah.
because it's not like you can really get the two of them confused in the one scene that they share
Right.
after they die. So I don't think she needed it.
I think
Yeah.
all we needed would have been Emotep to look at the mummy and like put his hand on her face or something and say Noxinamun, and we would have known
Well,
that
and
was
she
her
has kind of
mummy.
like a feminine form too.
Yeah,
So
like
like
she's
it's
a little
not
smaller. Like I
Mhm.
thought it was strange. It was a strange artistic costume choice to include this 3,000-year-old mummy that has hair sticking out of her bandages, which would not have been a thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, whatever. Tis a whale. Loved it. It's great. See you next week. Woo!
Ooh.
Woo!
Woo! Jazz hands, someone can see.
Yep.